Hey guys, it's Sam and welcome to my first video of 2020. I am filming this on New Year's Day and I refuse to get out of my pajamas, so welcome to my Mass Effect hoodie that I wear probably every day. And this video is actually my December 2019 reading wrap-up. Now, I ended up picking up 11 books in December. A couple of those were DNFs, but that is the most that I read all year. And I think even with the books that I did actually finish, it was at least equivalent to my other big reading month, which was April. And I wasn't even trying to cram books in, it just happened. Also, I am sick. I got a head cold on the way back from Christmas break. So if I'm sounding a little bit congested, that's why. I've done everything I can. I've taken Dayquil, I've taken Zicam, I've taken Airborne. This is what you get. You're lucky I even put makeup on my face today. So the first book that I read in December was The Wicked King by Holly Black. This is the second book in the Folk of Air trilogy, the first book being The Cruel Prince. I've done a full review for this, so I will link that on the screen. I was not the biggest fan of The Cruel Prince, but I ended up liking this. I believe because my expectations were a lot lower, but I enjoyed just the fast-pacedness of the story. I was sort of getting back into fantasy at this point after the fall. You need to take a break from a lot of fantasy due to my anxiety. Gotta love mental health messing with your reading habits, you know what I mean? But a lot of the things that really got me about The Cruel Prince being overhyped, I was just able to go with the flow with in this book because I was expecting them. I do like Jude and Carden's toxic dynamic and the fact that everyone in this book is toxic and they're all like morally gray and that's not going to be everyone's jam, but I really enjoyed it and it was just really easy to get through. I ended up giving this 4.25 to 4.5 stars. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to the last book in the series, which I don't yet own, so I don't know when I'll get to it in case any of you are wondering. I then read Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. This I already have a full review for as well, so I will try to keep my gushing to a minimum. This is the first book in a companion series set in this world, and this is a desert fantasy. It's adult, and there's so many good things about this. I enjoyed the magic system so highly. I enjoyed the different religions and rituals and things because our main character in this is biracial and she also has this tie to magic, and the relationship in here is like so slow burn and wonderful and supportive, and there's so many things. So I encourage you to listen to my review because I talk about it more in there because this book is so complex and layered that I can't sit here and give you like a 2-minute brief rundown of how I feel, but no, this made my favorite books of the year list, which will be coming up later on this month. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I then DNF'd The Love This With the World by Emily Henry. I got about 50 pages into this and ended up deciding to set it aside. This was one of the books that's been on my TBR the longest. It's sort of a fabulism story, but the reason that I DNF'd was basically the main character sees things, but it's described as something magical, but she has some mental health problems, so it's like, oh, the mental health isn't real because it's really just magic, and I hate that trope. So I was like, nah. And I ended up looking at a bunch of reviews, and a bunch of the reviews were like, I don't really like this book. This book has a lot of problems. There's a lot of insta-love, blah. So I was like, I can put this aside. So I did. I then listened to, on audiobook, Amber Lowe by Laura Elena Donnelly. This was also my Patreon book pick for this month. So every month my Patreon supporters get to vote in a poll for a book I will read and review that month. And this ended up being December's winner. So this I listened to on audio and I loved the audiobook. I have a review up for this as well that I will link on the screen. But the audiobook narrator is Mary Robinette Kowal, who is fantastic at accents and such. This is a speculative fiction, so it's a fantasy world, but it's not really a fantasy world that we think of. I have a hard time labeling something as fantasy when there's not magical creatures or magic or just things that are not our own. This basically feels like it's our world in like the 20s, 30s. It's that like Art Deco punk kind of world, and there's a lot of espionage and sabotage and political maneuverings and things like that. And the backdrop of this is the city of Amberlow, which is like a capital city of this one country. The people we're following are in the sort of criminal underbelly. One is a spy, one is a cabaret, actually 2 of them are cabaret dancers, but one starts out as just a cabaret dancer and the other one is a cabaret dancer slash smuggler. And this book is gay. The main relationship in here is a very tumultuous relationship between 2 men, and I love them so highly, and I got so invested in this book. I just wasn't sure what to expect when I went into it, put this book off for a very long time, didn't really care about a lot of the political machination type stuff, but the characters gripped my heart so much that I finished this audiobook right before work, and I went into work like dazed because there's kind of a cliffhanger ending, and I just was like, I don't know what to do with myself. So this actually made it towards my favorites. I don't know if it'll end up officially my favorites, but I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed it, and already continued on with the series actually. But before we get to that, I have a few other books that I read. So the next one is Christmas in the City, which is a adult romance short story compilation, and basically it's short stories by, I think every one was by a pair of authors, and these were all authors that I really wasn't familiar with. It was free on Kindle one day, and I was like, I really want some Christmas romances, and people were recommending them, and this is one of the free Kindle books that I got. So these were all stories that take place in a big city around Christmas that are Christmas romances. So I think it was like Dublin, Chicago, New York, London, Paris, I forget the other ones, that they're LA maybe, but it's all these like big cities that are like romantic and Christmassy. And this was just sort of mediocre and fluffy, which is what I wanted. I didn't want some like big gushy wonderful Christmas romance at this point. This is just what I wanted to kind of start the season off. So I ended up liking really only one of the stories, and that was the Chicago one, which was funny because I'm moving back to that area. But most of the stories followed a very typical arc of these two people meet in like a meet cute way, and they end up, because it's a short story so you don't have time to actually develop an arc, that's just like, oh, I feel like we need to be together. And then they end up hooking up. Usually a couple of them were non-smutty romances, but most of them had a sex scene that was pretty explicit at some point with varying degrees of explicitness. And then you had like almost like an epilogue part of the short story that was like, they were together forever. So just very like blah and basic and fine. So I ended up liking this. I gave it 2 stars. Like I said, the only one that I really enjoyed was the Chicago romance, because the cuteness of this one, that I recommend you guys read it if you want to like give it a go if it's still free on Kindle at some point, is that the 2 characters that met just by circumstance were actually supposed to meet later on and be set up at a Christmas party, and they find that out at the very end of the story, and I was like, that's cute and believable. I like that then. But the rest of them I was like, okay, insta-love, whatever. So after that, I ended up DNFing another book, and that was Barbery Station by R.G. Stearns. This I got like 140 pages into, and just wasn't really enjoying. This is a space station, space pirate story, which I thought was going to be really fun, but actually the writing was really dry. I didn't really care about any of the characters, and there's just a multitude of them, and the writing is so technical and focused on like technical science things that are happening on the space station. I'm like, I don't care. I'm here for space pirates. So I ended up DNFing this one because it's another one that's been on my shelf since I think 2015 or 2016, and I was like, nah, I'm not forcing myself through this. I really decided to be very brutal in December, like the end of the year, because I just was like, I'm not reading anything I don't enjoy just to read it in December. Then I read another favorite book, and that is One Day in December by Josie Silver. This I was not expecting to love as much as I did, and I'm just like still overwhelmed by how much I liked it. I will be doing a full review later on this month, so you guys can check that out. This is a Christmassy themed romance, so this was another book that was on sale on Kindle, and Chelsea from Chelsea Darling Reads was talking about it, although she doesn't love it as much as I do. But basically this is the story of 2 characters who see each other from a bus stop. The woman's on the bus, the man's off the bus, and they lock eyes, and it's one of those like magical, like we feel like we know each other moments, but he doesn't end up getting on the bus. And this is right before Christmas. She ends up looking for him kind of throughout the next year, and then meets him a year later, and he's now her best friend's boyfriend because they've met under different circumstances. So then it follows this group of friends, these people, over the next 10 years. Most of it I'd say was taking place between like Thanksgiving and New Year, so it's a very like holiday themed kind of time, but there's also instances of stuff in like March and summer and whatever. So this is a book that you don't need to read around Christmas because it does follow them throughout the years and different intervals throughout the years, but a lot of it and a lot of the big moments do happen around the holiday time, so it is a good book to read around the holidays if you want to. Anyway, I end up loving this, and this is just because there's so many things specifically about this that speak to me personally. I really like sort of like the ships in the night lovers situation where it's like they can't quite connect until later. There's things keeping them apart. Sort of this like, will they, won't they? There's a lot of things that they did and like media references that were made that just speak to me personally, and I will talk about that more in my review. They go to like a Grease festival at one point, like Grease the movie, which is something that just like very deeply speaks to me in my childhood, and there's just a lot of things that speak to me and just the feelings. And really with the romance book, what I'm looking for is to have like the feeling in my chest of just like loving them. Like, when I love a romance book, I will like ship the couple so hard that like my chest hurts and like I get chills and butterflies, which is probably not completely healthy, but that's what I want in a romance. There are some things that people aren't gonna like though, because there is some like emotional cheating happening, obviously, because these two have this connection, but then they're with other people throughout the time. So there's a lot of that. I'm not saying that that's good behavior or that I approve of cheating or anything like that, but it's something in this book that I was willing to be like, that's an issue, they're being shitty, but this is also kind of how things happen sometimes too. And this feels more real than a lot of the fluffy romances that I was reading. But I'm not someone that's like, ooh, I wish I meet under these same circumstances. This is so romantic. No, but it's just one of those like sort of gut-wrenching stories. Anyway, I went into this way more than I needed to for this wrap-up because I need to talk about this fully in depth in its own video. But I loved this book and read it in 2 days. So I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and it'll be on my favorites of the year as well. I'm just spoiling you for some of the books of my favorites of the year, but I think I have like 12 or 13, so you're not hearing everything. Then I left for Christmas and drove home for Christmas, which is a 13-hour car ride. So I listened to Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. This is the second book in the Farseer trilogy. This is like a 28-hour audiobook or something like that. And this is the first trilogy of her very large Realm of the Elderlings series, and this follows the main character Fitz. We follow him in the first book. He is a royal bastard, and so he's raised in the palace, but as this looked down upon person, it ends up becoming secretly the royal assassin. And this is the second book where he is, I believe, like 17 to probably like 22, maybe 23, like early 20s. Late teens to early 20s is what's happening here, and this is just a continuation of all the political machinations and things. And he definitely grew a lot in the first book, but you're still following a child mostly in the first book, and this is him as fully an adult. This is an adult series, so like bad things happen. But Fitz I grew to love a lot more in this. I liked reading this on audio. I didn't read the first book on audio. I'm going to continue to read this series on audio, this first trilogy. And there's a lot of consequences for actions, but also like Robin Hobb tortures her main characters, and I am very sad about it. But this was very good. I ended up really enjoying it and do plan on continuing the series, and gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, although I've heard the last book is a bit of a struggle, which I will also be reading on audiobook when I'm driving home during my move. Then my last Christmassy read was A Wedding in December by Sarah Morgan, another book that I read from Kindle because it was on sale. But this was delightful. It follows 3 characters all in the same family. One is the mother of the 2 daughters that we also follow, and they're a British family, and the youngest daughter is getting married. So she's calling home because she's living in America now and saying that she's getting married to this guy that she has only been dating for like 11 weeks. And then we have the mom who is getting separated from her husband, but they haven't told the kids, and now they have to go to this wedding, and they're like, oh no, what do we do? But there's still like feelings there. And then we have the sister of the other kid, and she is this like very successful doctor that lives in London, and she's kind of having a bit of a like quarter life crisis, and also like doesn't believe in love, but then has to go to this wedding and then meets somebody that's in the wedding party as well. So there's all of these types of romances here. There's sort of like the second chance romance thing going on with the separating but are they couple. There's the, like the new romance, the whirlwind new romance, and then there's the like hate to love, kind of like enemies bickering to lovers with the one sister who doesn't believe in love. So you get like all of the tropes. All of the tropes. There's only one bed trope. We have to sort of be like fake married, even though they are married, but like they have to pretend to be like really happy. All of these kinds of things that are really delightful, set in a Christmas backdrop because they're in Aspen, and it's just wonderful. So I really enjoyed this. I ended up finishing it on Christmas Day, and it was a delight, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And I will continue to read Sarah Morgan's Christmassy books around Christmas because that's kind of her thing. So I will look forward to next Christmas when I read another one of her books. That's very cute. Then I read another audiobook on the way home from Christmas, and that was Daughter of the Forest by Juliet Marillier, which is the first book in a series of companion stories that do follow the same family. But this is a retelling of I think something with swans. It's a swan story, but basically the main character's brothers get turned into swans in that fairy tale, and this is a fantasy retelling. I mean, I guess that's also a fantasy, but this is like a Celtic fantasy retelling of that. This is very literary in its writing and very slow, very character focused, but I found myself not being able to connect to the characters as much as I thought I was going to. And Sorsha, our main character, is someone who doesn't have a lot of agency within this story at all. There's a lot of the story where she can't speak, and when she can speak, what she says is pushed to the side, and that's true of the time period in which this was written and like the historical magical setting of this, but it just made it really hard for me to connect to the character and to the plot and everything with what was going on. There's also a very explicit rape scene in this story that was very hard to listen to, very graphic, and then there's later a sex scene that is very like loving and consensual, and that's fade to black, and I'm like, really? So there's a couple things about this that I didn't like, and I just didn't get a very like positive connection to the story. I end up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. It's beautifully written. I can see why it's sort of a classic fantasy for a lot of people, but I just didn't love it as much as I had hoped to love it, and won't be continuing with this series because I'm really not connected to this world. And the last book that I read in 2019 was Armistice by Laura Elena Donnelly, which is the second book in the Amber Lowe series. Like I mentioned with Amber Lowe, this is a Art Deco punk noir story, and this follows what happened in the events of the first book, so I really can't mention much. But this book is much more of the political maneuverings, and there was actually one of the main characters was missing. Something might be happening in the background with them, but you don't really know. And that was one of the characters that I really attached to in the first book, so that character being missing sucked for me. And then I felt like the other character that got introduced to kind of replace that character, I didn't really enjoy as much, didn't really care about their story, and there's just a lot more focus on like some political stuff that I just didn't care about, because again, I wasn't really in this story for the political machinations, even though that's a big part of it. I'm in it more for the characters and how those politics are shaping the character's behavior and what they're doing. And so I didn't really care about the character's behavior and what was happening to them, so I didn't care as much about this book. But there are some things that happen in here that make me intrigued for the final book. I do want to read the final book. I do plan to read the final book on audio. I still enjoyed this world and enjoyed the audiobook presentation of this world as well, but didn't love it as much as Amber Lowe. Ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. I was able to listen to this on like 3 speed and just kind of get through it because this felt like much more of a filler book. But I'm hoping the last book in the series will be real good. So that is it for all of the books that I read in December. I feel like I had just a wonderful reading month in December. I read a lot of fantasy, got back into fantasy, read a lot of audiobooks after not having read audiobooks for the majority of the year. Like I just went on this spell where I wasn't really reading audiobooks, and then read some romances, like just read a little bit of everything. It was a grand time. Ooh, before I forget, speaking of grand time, I'm going to be moving the end of this month, I know. So if you live in the Philadelphia area, I'm going to be doing a like bookish meetup, which the details of this I'm solidifying still. So I will be talking about this more in videos, but I'm going to be doing a bookish meetup January 11th, that's a Saturday, in Philly, probably starting at the Barnes & Noble in Rittenhouse Square. So I wanted to let you guys know, I did a poll about it in the community tab. I know not everyone sees that. So if you are in the Philly area and think you can make it, comment down below and let me know. I don't know all the details quite yet, and like the starting time will probably be like late morning, early afternoon, but it's just really going to be like a hangout. So I get a chance to meet a lot of you that live in the Philadelphia area, because I know a lot of you do and have mentioned like, I would love to like see you and do book things. And I'm like, same, but now I'm moving far away and that will never happen if I don't do it now. So January 11th, Philadelphia, if you live close by and think you can make it, let me know. I'm going to try to like call Barnes & Noble and be like, I don't need a meeting space or anything because it's not like that, but like, can you house this many people? Is that going to be fine? So working that out. So follow me on Twitter, which is linked down below, for details, which I will talk about, and then I'll try to talk about in a video if I can, but I'm pre-filming a lot of videos because they're like my year wrap-up videos, so I don't know if I'll know the information before that date. So yeah, anyway, that's that. So comment down below, let me know what book you read in December and loved, and if you've read any of these books and have opinions, let me know. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.